The bond indenture, we've mentioned earlier on quickly. This is the one that represents the kind of terms and conditions of the bond. So the legal contract describes the form of the bond, any obligations the issuer has, and potentially the rights of the bondholder, often referred to as well as the trust deed. So again, be aware of that interchangeable term. The covenants will specify what we call affirmative or positive covenants. They will also express what we call negative covenants. So affirmative covenants are actions that the issuer promises to do or to make. Negative put restrictions, prohibitions put on the borrower. So again, know the difference between affirmative and negative. So you can see there, affirmative is the promise to make timely interest and principal payments. So they're going to make the coupon payments and the redemption of nominal value on time. It's a promise, a commitment. They promise to comply with any applicable laws of the jurisdiction of maybe where the bond is issued, and a promise to insure and maintain assets. Particularly quite important, because you will find that obviously if the company decides, well, they end up defaulting on their debt, then it's going to be reliant upon the possible assets of the company to be used to service what the bondholders get back in the event of a liquidation process. So to know that the company is going to insure and maintain assets gives some sort of security to the bondholder upon the company getting into financial distress. Now, the negative covenants place restrictions on the borrower. So, for example, restrictions on debt. If the bond has been issued, the bond might state in the indenture the restrictions put upon the company to issue other chunks of debt to the market after the bond that's been issued just now. Now, linked to that would be the pledges that are then put inside, is that although we may allow for further issuances of debt, we might say that those further issuances of debt would be more subordinate than the debt that's currently in issue, which is said to be more senior, suggesting that if the company was to get into financial distress, the companies, or the bonds that are issued more recently would therefore have more kind of priority in the liquidation process than debt issues that were further down the line. It could be restrictions on prior claims, so protection of unsecured bondholders. Potential to be unsecured means that you as a bondholder took on the view that when you bought this bond, if the company were to get into financial distress, there were no assets pledged to satisfy that bondholder specifically. Now, the problem about prior claims is that what might happen, what's the unsecured bond that's been issued, what may happen is the company decides to take assets that weren't secured at the time of which the unsecured bond was issued, and then decides to go and securitize it against another bond issue. Well, ultimately for the unsecured bondholder, that gives them less in terms of security upon the liquidation of the company, because those assets will go to service specific issues of debt before they can come and service the unsecured bondholders. Now, in the event of liquidation, you're always going to get the secured bondholders that get a claim first of all, and unsecured is underneath. But obviously, if you start moving assets that were generally unsecured to become secured, then ultimately the unsecured bondholders face more risk. So we might put restrictions on prior claims and therefore providing more clarity to the unsecured bondholders. Restrictions on shareholders in forms of dividend payments. Again, trying to make sure the bondholder knows that money isn't leaving the company by huge dividend payments back to shareholders, therefore giving the bondholders more security. Could be restrictions on asset disposals, which obviously would be assets leaving the company, which could be used as security in liquidation. Also, the potential risk of mergers and acquisitions that provides a little bit of uncertainty to the bondholders when these sort of corporate actions take place. So we'll find that obviously the covenants could be both affirmative and negative, and just making sure that you can identify the difference between affirmative and negative. Affirmative promises to make, negative suggesting that they put prohibitions on the borrower, things they will not do.